I could not. I hated his family so much. It was so bad. Welcome back to my channel. I just finished watching Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway, which is a movie that came out very recently, and I'm sure everyone has heard about it because it's based off the real life case where a woman had to fight for her custody of her children. I do want to mention that at the start of the movie, they do indicate that they take some liberties with the story for the sake of drama and storytelling. However, from my knowledge of the show, I do feel like it was relatively accurate and honestly downplayed a lot of things. First, I think it's really important for us to talk about Mrs. Chatterjee specifically as a traditional woman living in a foreign country, because there's a lot of challenges that come with that, and I don't think that they're talked about enough. Traditionally, we are not the type of women that will speak up because we want to cause as less friction as humanly possible, and they do try to subtly address how she is uncomfortable and in this very foreign land learning their whole culture all at once. So when they show the early years of Mrs. and Mr. Chatterjee's relationship, they show how she is a little bit uncomfortable with the clothing that she has to wear in this foreign country, which, I mean, I don't think you should have to do that, but I think typically we tend to try to adopt the environment that we're in so that we can blend in more easily and adapt into the society that we're in. The second thing you notice is that she's very uncomfortable with PDA. On the other hand, you'll notice when you're watching the movie that the husband is way more comfortable and it's just very nonchalant for him. And the reason I think this is because men tend to have fewer restrictions from that culture where they're coming from, and so it's easier for them to adapt and normal for them to see all these different changes, and they're kind of raised to adopt these changes anyway. But for women, that tends not to be the case. In the beginning of the movie, you see that the husband does very little to help his wife adapt to the new environment that she's in, and gets frustrated and increasingly frustrated with her that she's not able to adapt the practices and the traditions of their culture that they're in. I almost felt like no one ever cared to sit her down properly and try to have a proper conversation about what the heck is going on, what is she going to experience when she goes to this new foreign country, and how to adapt. And I feel like she was never given proper supports to sustain a healthy life and balance of life in this new foreign country. I just feel like she was very lost and no one tried to guide her, particularly her husband, who should have been there to guide her. No one explained to her the seriousness of her situation when the kids were taken away and what to do, or no one tried to really speak her language so that, and when I say speak her language, I don't mean the literal language that she speaks like her mother tongue. I'm talking about trying to communicate with her in a way that she would understand. It was just like, oh, this is just how things are, like, just adapt. Why aren't you adapting? Just adapt. This is how things have to be. Like, it was so frustrating to see that. At the same time, the things that she was doing to get her children back, some of them were very terrible decisions on her part. Both your children taken away, you want them back, you're gonna do what you can, and no one is explaining to her that things are very different here compared to in India. You can't just walk in and try to take your kids away, which is what she would have otherwise done, because she doesn't know any better in this foreign country that she's in, and no one is guiding her, or they're not guiding her in a way that is getting through to her. And I think in the movie, and even from when I read about the actual case, it seems like everyone was trying to make her out to be some crazy unhinged person, but she is literally a mother, and her whole mission in life is to be a mom and be a loving mom and everything. Like, traditionally, that's what she's been raised to do and think and know and want to do, and you take it away from her and you expect her to have a normal reaction, just sit calmly while she's being told that, yeah, your kids are being taken away and you're not going to see them again. I just think that it was a lot for her to have to process what seemed like on her own, because she didn't have any support from anyone. Her family does come to support. They show that in the movie, and I believe that's what happens in real life as well, but they are also foreigners. They don't know what to do. They can only be like a Sahara or like provide some like emotional support, but they don't know what's going on. They're confused. They're also scared and worried, right? Like, understandable. But let's move on to Mr. Chatterjee. Oh my god, I have so much to say about this guy. First of all, this guy was only focused on his citizenship. He didn't give a shit about anything else, okay? It was so frustrating to watch. It was so infuriating. And here's the thing. You can say that, you know, what, he struggled to get here and all of this. Okay, just is not the reason that our parents struggle to go to a foreign country so that they can have a better life and better future for their kids. Now, if your kids are taken away and things keep getting worse and you're just focused on being quiet and getting your citizenship, if your kids are taken away, how are you benefiting them in the long run? Like, it doesn't connect. You're not able to provide any support for your wife, or minimal support. It did feel like at the beginning he was trying to just calm things down. He was just not doing enough, to be honest. It just felt like he was focused on getting his citizenship, making sure he saves face no matter what, even though he's literally losing his kids or about to lose his kids. All I can think about is blaming his wife for everything. And I'm like, allegations of like abuse are brought up, he just gets annoyed about it, and he's just like, no, like it's not a thing. And then he gets frustrated. Why was it brought up? Like, okay, we're gonna take a second. The thing with Mr. Chatterjee was that he was not a very involved man in his household, whether you talk about his relationship with his wife or as a father. And yes, they do depict him as being, you know, like kind of loving towards his kids and stuff like that, but that's not what really develops and fosters a bond. You have to be way more present than that, and it takes a lot more than just, you know, spending a few minutes with your kids once in a while or whatever. Like, I'm sure he cared about his kids, but clearly he did not have as close of a connection. And I don't want to hear the argument of like, well, you know, a mother's love is just different and everything. A real father will truly love his kids and be seriously affected by all of this. I don't know if it's the fact that he felt like he needed to keep it together because his wife was not able to keep it together. I don't know what it was, but I just felt like the whole time it was so disingenuous, and all he really cared about was keeping things hush so that he can get his citizenship and will deal with the kids and getting them back later, kind of a thing. The allegations of abuse, first of all, I feel like they really glossed over it in the whole movie, and I tried to dig a little bit and try to understand if there were actually issues of abuse and to what extent was it in that marriage, in that household. And I was able to find an interview where the original actual person, Mrs. Chatterjee, explains how there was abuse in the house, and then during this time period when her in-laws did visit her, they were very abusive towards her, which they do show like an element of that in the movie, but you could tell it was seriously just glossed over. There was no way they were going to just stop there, because why would they? Unfortunately, there was a lot of physical abuse that she endured, and also like there's an account of her being locked outside of her home in Norway in negative 30-degree weather and things like that. So clearly this guy, there was issues happening within the guy and his family that she had to deal with. I think that when you're in a situation like that and you have kids, like the kids are all that you're living for at times. So it's no wonder that she felt like her world was ending and crashing down, because it's not just her kids, it's her life that she's fighting for. But Mr. Chatterjee, this man, didn't give a shit. Like, his whole issue was, why was this brought to light? Because everything would have been fine if we just kept hush hush. You know, you would have continued to endure the abuse, and I would have gotten my citizenship, and everything would have been fine. I just feel like there were so many complexities in this whole situation, and honestly the show did a good job of it, but they really glossed over a lot of things. And the last thing, towards the end or the last half of the movie, the way that he was so deceitful towards his wife and his kids, like, oh my god, the whole like, he agreed to have his brother take custody of the kids, and they would get paid for it. Like, I cannot, how can you like be so greedy and not care for your kids at all? Like, I could not. Like, people always like to mention how a mother is just different from a husband because she has this connection, she, you know, gave birth and did all of these things, you know, I get that, I get it, but how is a father so detached? How? I cannot get around it. And how can you be so cruel to the mother of your children, and not give a shit and just take money so I guess in his perspective, he still had access to his kids, or he could get access to his kids if he wanted to, under the radar, but they weren't letting his wife have access to her own children. Like, that is so cruel. And like the fact that the mother-in-law, who is also obviously a mother, lets that happen. Like, you know, it's always like you would think that another woman would understand her and sympathize with her, but damn, the world is so damn cruel. And just, wow, I could not. I hated his family so much. It was so bad. When his wife freaks out, he's like, you're going crazy. Why are you going crazy? But he's doing nothing to, you know, calm her down or do something to like be a man and like handle the situation. Like, okay, I feel very worked up about this. The other thing I wanted to mention is the huge lack of understanding of cultural differences from people from a different country. Like, I don't understand Like, you have to be so self-centered to think that your way and your culture's way of raising children or keeping a household is the only way to do things. Like, holy crap. Like, I don't care. Norway's population is 99% Norwegian. We live in the 21st century. Like, we all watch movies. We take part in social media. Like, you know that you guys aren't the only ones that exist. Like, why does this like, I'm just saying. In the same way that Mrs. Chatterjee in the movie mentions how if this was happening in the reverse, if this was a Norwegian family that was going through this, it would be a totally different situation. It was just really sad to see that even in 2011, which is I believe when all of these events started happening, we still had so many issues with racism and intolerance of other people's culture, and it continues to be an issue. It's just terrible. And the last thing I want to talk about that pissed me off was that lawyer, the guy that was adopted and a part of the system and went through the system and was originally defending the Mrs. Chatterjee side. He was such a he played two sides. Listen, this is the reality of lawyers. They're gonna play for the side that they're getting paid for, right? And I think that Mrs. Chatterjee didn't understand that, and she felt that it was very deceptive, and she was right for that. But unfortunately, that is the reality of the world that we live in. That's just how lawyers tend to work. What was messed up though, and what really irritated me, was the fact that at the end of the show, when he comes in last minute to try to get the kids back to Norway for like whatever financial gain that they will get if they do that, what I hated about that whole situation was that right at the end, he ends up being like, yeah, she is a good mom and she would never do this just for the money or whatever. And then when she eventually wins her kids back, he's like smiling at her like, oh my gosh, happy for you and you did the right thing. And I'm like, bro, you were trying to screw her over just now. Like, you don't get to smile and give us a full circle moment. And I just hated it. It was so stupid. And I don't know if this actually happened in the real case, but F that guy. All this to say that this was a really good movie. It was really entertaining. It had me sobbing, like actually, like I've never actually used the word sobbing before, but I was actually crying like a baby because it is very emotional, and I think everyone can relate to this situation. Well, maybe not literally, but can imagine the pain that that mom probably went through. It was a really good retelling of the whole case and the story. I do think that they glossed over a lot of things that were a little bit more dark for the sake of the show or the movie, I guess. The performances were good. Would I watch it again? No, because it was really good and I probably would cry again, but I got my fill from it. I would definitely recommend anyone to watch the show if they haven't already. Whether you've come across the case before or not, this was a really good movie. It was very emotional and produced a lot of tears, but it was really good, well done. But that's all I have for this video. Definitely check out my other reviews for other shows I've watched on Netflix, including Queen Charlotte as well as Queen Cleopatra if you haven't seen them already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. This one was a lot of work, but it's okay.